Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you could completely change how you see your relationship, and more importantly, how you see yourself as a man. Right now, as you're watching this, you might be living in a prison that you don't even realize exists. A prison that has no bars, no walls, no guards, but one that's more confining than any physical cell could ever be. The warden of this prison isn't some corrupt official or tyrannical government. It's the woman you love, and she's using your own emotions, your own desires, your own masculine nature against you. Dr. Robert Glover, author of No More Mr. Nice Guy, discovered through decades of research that millions of men are trapped in what he calls covert contracts with women. These are unspoken agreements where you give everything, expecting love and respect in return, but instead you get manipulation, control, and emotional imprisonment. The most dangerous part, you think this is normal. You think this is what love looks like. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to tell you. If she's doing these 5 specific behaviors, your relationship isn't a partnership. It's a power dynamic where you've surrendered your masculine core, your freedom, and your self-respect. And the longer you stay in this prison, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before you handed her the keys. The first sign that you're living in relationship prison is when she systematically isolates you from your social circle. Your friends, your family, and most importantly, from other men who could remind you of who you used to be. This isn't the obvious dramatic isolation you see in movies. This is subtle, strategic, and it happens so gradually that you don't even notice until one day you wake up and realize you haven't had a meaningful conversation with your best friend in months. Rollo Tomasi, in The Rational Male, explains this phenomenon through what he calls operative social conventions. Women instinctively understand that a man's peer group serves as a reality check for his behavior and decisions. Your friends, especially your male friends, can see when you're being manipulated in ways that you can't because you're emotionally invested. So she begins the isolation process by making these relationships uncomfortable or inconvenient. It starts with small comments about your friends. I don't really like how Jake talks to women. Or why do you need to spend so much time with the guys? Aren't I enough? She'll create conflicts on nights when you have plans with friends, sudden emergencies that require your immediate attention, or she'll be in a particularly affectionate mood right when you're about to leave. She's not doing this consciously, but her feminine psychology is operating on a deeper level, understanding that your independence threatens her control. The manipulation becomes more sophisticated as time goes on. She'll schedule important conversations or create emotional situations that coincide with your social plans. She'll develop sudden illnesses or anxiety attacks that require your presence. She'll plan romantic gestures or intimate moments precisely when you're supposed to be with friends. The message is clear. Choosing anyone else over her is a betrayal of the relationship. What makes this particularly insidious is that she frames it as love. I just want to spend time with you becomes the justification for systematically cutting you off from everyone who knew you before her influence took hold. Dr. John Gottman's research on relationship dynamics shows that healthy couples maintain individual identities and social connections. When one partner systematically undermines these connections, it's not love, it's control. The psychological impact of this isolation is profound. Human beings are social creatures, and men especially need what psychologists call homosocial bonding, connections with other men that provide emotional support, reality testing, and masculine validation. When she cuts you off from these connections, you become entirely dependent on her for emotional feedback and social interaction. You lose your reference point for normal masculine behavior and healthy relationship dynamics. The second warning sign that your relationship has become a prison is when she weaponizes your emotions against you. particularly your anger and frustration. This is perhaps the most sophisticated form of psychological manipulation because it turns your natural masculine responses into tools of control. In healthy relationships, both partners can express their full range of emotions without fear of retaliation or manipulation. But in relationship prison, your emotional expressions become leverage points that she uses to maintain dominance. The process works like this. She creates situations that naturally produce frustration or anger in you. Then when you respond with these completely normal emotions, she frames you as the problem. Dr. Patricia Evans, author of The Verbally Abusive Relationship, identifies this pattern as emotional baiting. She'll push your boundaries, disrespect your clearly stated preferences, or create unnecessary drama and conflict. When you respond with natural frustration, she immediately shifts into victim mode. Why are you yelling at me? I can't believe you would speak to me that way. This is exactly why I can't talk to you about anything. The genius of this manipulation is that it makes you question your own emotional responses. You start to believe that your frustration is unreasonable, that your anger is inappropriate, that your boundaries are selfish. She's essentially training you to suppress your masculine nature, to swallow your authentic reactions, and to accept unacceptable behavior without protest. Robert Greene, in The Art of Seduction, explains that the most effective forms of manipulation are those that make the victim complicit in their own control. When she weaponizes your emotions, you become an active participant in your own emotional imprisonment. You start policing your own reactions, suppressing your own instincts, and apologizing for having normal human responses to her behavior. This creates what psychologists call learned helplessness. You stop advocating for yourself because every time you try, you're made to feel like the aggressor. You stop expressing your needs because they're consistently framed as unreasonable or selfish. You stop trusting your own emotional compass because it's been recalibrated to serve her agenda rather than your well-being. The third sign that you're living in relationship prison is financial control and manipulation. Money represents freedom, options, and independence. When she systematically undermines your financial autonomy, she's not just controlling your resources, she's controlling your ability to make independent choices about your life. This doesn't always look like the obvious scenario where she takes control of your bank accounts or credit cards. Modern financial manipulation is far more subtle and psychologically sophisticated. It might start with her input on your spending decisions. Do you really need that? Wouldn't that money be better saved for our future? I can't believe you would waste money on something so selfish when we have bills to pay. What starts as financial advice gradually becomes financial control. She positions herself as the responsible one, the practical one, the one who really understands money. Your desires, your interests, your financial goals become secondary to what she deems appropriate or necessary. Dr. Lundy Bancroft, author of Why Does He Do That?, explains that financial abuse often begins with seemingly reasonable concerns about money management. But the real manipulation comes in how she uses money to control your behavior and choices. If you want to spend money on something she disapproves of, suddenly there's a financial crisis that requires that exact amount of money. If you want to pursue a goal or interest that requires financial investment, she'll find reasons why it's irresponsible or impractical. She creates financial emergencies that conveniently coincide with your independent plans or desires. She'll overspend on things she wants, then complain about being financially stressed when you want to spend money on your priorities. She'll make financial commitments without consulting you, then expect you to sacrifice your wants to accommodate her decisions. The psychological impact of financial manipulation goes far beyond money. When you can't make independent financial decisions, you can't make independent life decisions. You can't pursue interests, hobbies, or goals that require financial investment. You can't maintain friendships that involve spending money. You can't even leave the relationship easily because she systematically undermined your financial independence. This creates what economists call sunk cost fallacy in relationship terms. You become so financially intertwined and dependent that leaving feels impossible. Even when staying is emotionally and psychologically destructive, she's essentially used your own money to build the prison that keeps you trapped. The fourth warning sign is perhaps the most psychologically damaging. She systematically undermines your confidence, your competence, and your masculine identity through what appears to be helpfulness or constructive criticism. This is gaslighting disguised as improvement, manipulation masked as motivation. Dr. Robin Stern, author of The Gaslight Effect, explains that the most effective gaslighters aren't obviously malicious. They present themselves as caring partners who just want to help you become better, but their help consistently leaves you feeling inadequate, confused, and dependent on their validation. She begins by identifying areas where you're already somewhat insecure or uncertain. Maybe you're not completely confident in your career, your appearance, your social skills, or your abilities. Instead of building you up in these areas, she subtly reinforces your insecurities while positioning herself as the solution. "I'm just trying to help you," becomes the preface to systematic criticism. She'll point out your flaws in public settings, making jokes at your expense that leave you feeling humiliated but unable to respond without looking overly sensitive. She'll offer to fix things about you that weren't broken until she pointed them out as problems. The manipulation becomes more sophisticated as she starts managing your image and your interactions with others. She'll speak for you in social situations, correct you when you're telling stories, or provide better versions of your opinions and experiences. She's essentially training everyone around you to see her as the competent one and you as the one who needs managing. What makes this particularly destructive is that she frames her criticism as care and her control as concern. "I only say these things because I love you. I just want you to be the best version of yourself. If I don't tell you, who will?" She's positioned herself as the only person who cares enough to be honest with you, which makes questioning her feedback feel like rejecting love itself. The psychological impact of this constant undermining is profound. You start to internalize her criticisms and doubt your own perceptions and abilities. You become dependent on her validation and approval for basic confidence. You stop trusting your own judgment and start deferring to hers in areas where you were previously competent and confident. This creates what psychologists call trauma bonding. You become addicted to the rare moments when she does offer approval or validation because they provide relief from the constant criticism and doubt. You mistake this intermittent reinforcement for love, not recognizing that healthy love doesn't require you to earn basic respect and acceptance. The fifth and final sign that your relationship has become a prison is the most subtle but perhaps most important. She systematically trains you to prioritize her emotions, her needs, and her comfort over your own well-being, your own goals, and your own authentic self-expression. This is the ultimate prison because the bars are made of your own conscience turned against you. This process begins with what appears to be emotional intimacy. She shares her feelings, her fears, her insecurities with you, and naturally, as a caring partner, you want to help. But gradually, her emotional state becomes your responsibility. When she's upset, it's your job to fix it. When she's anxious, it's your job to manage it. When she's uncomfortable, it's your job to change whatever is causing her discomfort. Dr. Harriet Lerner, author of The Dance of Anger, explains that healthy relationships involve emotional responsibility, where each person manages their own emotional state while offering appropriate support to their partner. But in manipulative relationships, this responsibility becomes one-sided. You become responsible for her emotions while she accepts no responsibility for yours. This emotional caretaking gradually expands into all areas of your life. Your choices, your goals, your interests, your career decisions all become filtered through the question, how will this affect her? Your authentic self-expression becomes secondary to her comfort. Your needs become less important than her preferences. She doesn't explicitly demand this prioritization. Instead, she creates emotional consequences for choices that don't prioritize her well-being. When you pursue your own interests, she becomes anxious or depressed. When you make decisions without considering her feelings first, she becomes hurt or withdrawn. When you express parts of yourself that she's uncomfortable with, she becomes critical or distant. The manipulation is that these emotional responses are presented as natural consequences of your choices rather than deliberate attempts to control your behavior. "I'm not trying to control you," she'll say. "I just can't help how I feel when you do things that hurt me." But her definition of hurt gradually expands to include any choice or behavior that doesn't prioritize her comfort above your authenticity. What makes this particularly insidious is that it hijacks your natural masculine instinct to protect and provide for the woman you love. She's not asking you to choose her over your own well-being directly. Instead, she's creating a situation where choosing your own well-being feels like hurting someone you care about. This turns your own conscience into a tool of manipulation. The long-term impact of this dynamic is the complete erosion of your authentic self. You stop knowing what you actually want because you've trained yourself to want whatever causes her the least distress. You stop knowing what you actually think because you've learned to think whatever keeps the peace. You stop knowing who you actually are because you've become whoever she needs you to be. This is perhaps the most dangerous form of relationship prison because it doesn't feel like prison at all. It feels like love, like compromise, like being a good partner. But healthy love doesn't require you to disappear. Healthy compromise doesn't require one person to consistently sacrifice their authenticity for the other's comfort. Being a good partner doesn't mean becoming a prisoner to someone else's emotional state. The psychological research on healthy relationships consistently shows that the strongest partnerships are between two individuals who maintain their separate identities while choosing to share their lives. When one person systematically absorbs the other, it's not love, it's psychological consumption. Dr. David Schnarch, author of Passionate Marriage, explains that true intimacy requires what he calls differentiation, the ability to maintain your own identity and emotional regulation while being emotionally connected to your partner. When she trains you to prioritize her emotional state over your own authenticity, she's preventing true intimacy while creating dependency. Now, if you're recognizing these patterns in your relationship, you might be feeling a mixture of anger, sadness, and perhaps most importantly, recognition. The question isn't whether these behaviors are present. If you're honest with yourself, you probably already know. The question is what you're going to do about it. The first step is understanding that these aren't random behaviors or unfortunate relationship dynamics. They're systematic patterns of control that serve a specific psychological function, maintaining her position of power in the relationship while keeping you dependent and compliant. Recognizing this isn't about demonizing her, it's about understanding the dynamics so you can change them. The second step is recognizing that you have more power in this situation than you realize. These manipulation tactics only work because you allow them to work. Not because you're weak or stupid, but because you haven't recognized them for what they are. Once you see the patterns clearly, you can start responding differently. The third step is understanding that changing these dynamics will likely create conflict and resistance. When you start setting boundaries, reclaiming your independence, and prioritizing your own well-being, she will likely escalate her controlling behaviors before she accepts the new dynamic. This is what psychologists call an extinction burst, a temporary increase in unwanted behavior when previous methods stop working. But here's what most men don't understand. This conflict isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something right. Healthy relationships can handle conflict and negotiation. If your relationship can't handle you advocating for yourself, then it was never a healthy relationship to begin with. The ultimate truth is that you can't love someone into treating you well. You can't sacrifice your way into respect. You can't disappear enough to make someone appreciate you. Real love, the kind that actually fulfills you and makes you stronger rather than weaker, requires two complete individuals choosing each other, not one person consuming the other. If these patterns resonate with you, the choice is yours. You can continue living in a prison that feels like love, or you can start the difficult but liberating process of reclaiming your authentic self and demanding the respect that every human being deserves. The bars of this prison aren't made of steel. They're made of your own acceptance of unacceptable behavior, and just like you allowed them to be built, you have the power to tear them down. Remember, you deserve a relationship that makes you stronger, not weaker. You deserve a partner who celebrates your independence, not someone who systematically undermines it. You deserve love that enhances your life, not love that requires you to sacrifice your life to maintain it. The prison door has always been unlocked. You just needed to recognize that you had the key all along.